Aaron Mace stood at the edge of the scrapyard, the dull hum of Earth's dimming sun casting long shadows over the wreckage. Once, this place had been a bustling hub of industry, a vital piece of Earth's infrastructure. Now, it was nothing more than a graveyard of forgotten technology and human ingenuity. The remnants of war, collapse, and years of neglect lay scattered in every direction. Rusting vehicles, half-scorched containers, and broken machinery were all that remained. Aaron, a seasoned scavenger, knew these grounds well. Having spent years combing through the debris in search of useful parts to sustain his modest existence, he had grown accustomed to the sight of decay. The world had crumbled in ways that no one had ever fully predicted. Earth's golden age had become a distant memory, buried beneath the weight of human error and alien intervention. Today was no different, or so it seemed. As the midday sun filtered through the layers of haze, Aaron's boots crunched over the twisted metal and fractured glass. His dog, Bolt, padded silently beside him, the creature's ears perked at the slightest sound. Aaron wasn't expecting to find anything of great value. The real treasures in places like this had long been scavenged. But something in the air felt off today, an unfamiliar stillness that tugged at him, pulling him deeper into the scrapyard. It was when he heard a faint sound, a rustle, barely audible above the wind, that he paused. Bolt's ears perked up again, his nose twitching as he pulled ahead. Aaron followed, curiosity piquing his interest. After a few paces, he spotted her. Tucked in the shadow of a collapsed metal structure, the girl lay curled in on herself. Her clothes were ragged, and her hair matted with dirt, but her face, her eyes, struck Aaron with an odd familiarity. They were violet, shimmering under the weak sunlight. Her skin was pale, almost too pale, as though she hadn't seen the light of day in far too long. Aaron's heart tightened. She was no older than 15, perhaps even younger. He knelt beside her, hesitant at first, unsure if she was alive. There had been so many lost souls in this part of Earth, orphans, refugees, survivors who had found nothing but death among the ruins. But something about this girl felt different. "Hey," Aaron said softly, his voice cutting through the silence. "Are you okay?" Her eyes fluttered open, their glow dim but unmistakable. She stared at him for a moment, her gaze unblinking, as if assessing him. Then, without a word, she pushed herself upright with a strength that belied her frail appearance. For a split second, Aaron thought she might lash out, but instead, she simply looked at him, empty, yet profoundly knowing. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, his voice gentle yet firm. "You're safe now. I can help." The girl didn't speak, but she followed him as he gently guided her toward the small shack he called home. Bolt, ever the companion, trotted beside them, his quiet presence a comfort to the girl. Aaron's thoughts raced as they walked. Who was she? How had she ended up here? And what was it that made her eyes gleam like that? He didn't have answers, but for the first time in years, he felt the stirring of something unfamiliar, something like hope. The days that followed felt surreal to Aaron. At first, he had expected the girl to be like so many others he had encountered over the years, a silent survivor who would eventually wither from the weight of her circumstances. But Lyra, he had taken to calling her that, though she never gave a name, was different. She was quiet, but there was a sharpness in her silence. While Aaron worked on salvaging old tech, she seemed to watch him constantly, studying his movements with an intensity that unnerved him. At first, he dismissed it as curiosity, a natural reaction from someone who had likely been living in isolation for far too long. But as the days passed, he began to notice something more. One morning, as Aaron worked on disassembling an old solar panel to repair his shack's power grid, Lyra stood nearby, her eyes glued to his hands as he worked. It wasn't until he stood up, wiping the sweat from his brow, that she moved. Her small fingers, delicate but sure, reached out and mimicked his exact movements, unscrewing bolts, adjusting wiring, aligning circuits. Aaron watched, frozen for a moment, as she methodically went about the task with the same precision he had used. "Hey, I didn't know you could do that," Aaron said, half in surprise, half in amusement. Lyra didn't respond. She simply finished the repair, testing the panel with a quick flick of her hand before turning back to Aaron, with those violet eyes watching him like a hawk. The faintest hint of a smile tugged at the corner of her lips, but it was gone before he could fully recognize it. Intrigued, Aaron decided to test her further. Over the next few days, he intentionally left small tools out of reach or hid parts of his equipment. Each time, Lyra would find the missing component without being told, her fingers tracing the edges of the debris as if she had a map in her mind. She never spoke, not once, but she seemed to understand the unspoken language of mechanics with eerie familiarity. It was as if she wasn't simply learning by observation. She was remembering. "Where did you learn this?" Aaron asked one evening as they sat down for their meager dinner. The silence stretched between them, but this time it didn't feel as heavy. There was an unspoken connection, something that had begun to bridge the vast gap between two strangers from different worlds. Lyra, for the first time, looked at him directly, her violet eyes reflecting the dim light of the fire. Her lips parted, but no words came. She opened her mouth as though something was on the tip of her tongue, only to close it again, as if the right words hadn't yet returned to her. Aaron didn't press her. Instead, he leaned back, studying her. There was no doubt now that she wasn't just any survivor from the wastelands. There was something in her, a spark, an intelligence, a depth that made her stand apart. It was like she was remembering something long forgotten, some hidden knowledge buried deep within her mind. The following day, as Aaron set out to check the perimeter for potential scavenging spots, he left Lyra alone in the shack, assuming she would remain where she was. But when he returned hours later, there was something different. A large pile of old, salvaged equipment sat neatly stacked in the corner, everything organized by type and condition. The most startling discovery, however, was a collection of maps, ancient star charts, long erased from any known records, spread across the floor. Aaron's breath caught in his chest. "Where did you?" Lyra didn't look up. She continued tracing her fingers over the maps, her gaze focused as if she were solving a puzzle only she understood. "Who are you, really?" Aaron whispered to himself, though he knew, deep down, that the answer would be far more complicated than he could ever imagine. Aaron couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching someone unravel, piece by piece, like an ancient artifact being carefully restored. Lyra's behavior, once strange and enigmatic, was now becoming more unsettling. The things she did, the way she seemed to understand systems and patterns no one else would have, weren't normal. And yet it wasn't just her uncanny intellect that unnerved him. It was the quiet, growing certainty that she was hiding something vast and beyond him. It started with the dreams. One evening, as the two of them sat by the fire, Lyra suddenly stiffened, her violet eyes narrowing, as if she were lost in some far-off place. Her fingers twitched at her sides, her breath quickening. Aaron watched her closely, concerned. He'd seen enough signs of post-traumatic stress in survivors, but this was different. There was an intensity in her expression, a flicker of recognition that shot across her face, followed by a sudden sense of clarity. She turned to him, her voice a mere whisper. "I remember. A starship." Aaron froze. He had been expecting the mention of a memory of survival, maybe a family lost in the chaos. A starship, though. That was something else entirely. Something far too grand for someone like Lyra, who had only known this forsaken corner of Earth. "Tell me more," he urged, though his own voice trembled slightly, unsure of what he was about to hear. Lyra blinked, as though pulling the memory to the surface from the depths of her mind. "There were voices calling to me," she murmured. A command. But it was distant, fractured, like it was trying to reach me from another time. Aaron leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. What was the ship like? Her eyes glazed over as she described it. A massive vessel, far larger than anything humanity had built, Its hull was sleek and glowed with an otherworldly light, the engines humming with the power of a civilization long past. The more she spoke, the clearer the picture became in Aaron's mind. This wasn't a dream. It was a memory. Lyra wasn't just recalling something random. She was remembering something fundamental to her existence. When she paused, her hands clenched at her sides. Her voice softened, almost a whisper. I was supposed to be there. I was supposed to lead. The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Aaron felt a chill run down his spine. Lyra wasn't just a homeless girl from the scrapyard. She wasn't just some orphan caught in the wake of Earth's decline. She was something else, something more. Aaron didn't know what to make of it. His mind raced, trying to grasp at some logical explanation. Was she a descendant of some forgotten royal bloodline? Or was it possible that her memory had been altered, twisted by trauma or exposure to something beyond human understanding? The next day, Aaron decided to take a risk. He used an old terminal he had found deep within the scrapyard, a relic from before the collapse. He connected it to a satellite uplink, weak but functional. If there was anything in the vast, fragmented databases of Earth's past that could explain Lyra, this might be his chance to learn. He typed in her description, her strange abilities, her cryptic words, and hit search. The results were immediate, and they were nothing like what he expected. The system retrieved a set of data fragments, scattered, encrypted, but one thing stood out. Her name, or something like it, appeared in the records. It was old, coded, and buried in files marked Sovereign Protocol. It was followed by a list of coordinates and a cryptic message. The hair awakens. Aaron sat back in his chair, the gravity of the discovery sinking in. This wasn't just a girl. This was something far more significant, something he had stumbled into by accident. And now, he couldn't walk away. Neither of them could. Aaron barely slept that night. The fragment of data he'd uncovered sat like a heavy weight in his chest, its implications pressing against his mind. Sovereign Protocol. The words kept echoing through his thoughts, each one carrying more gravity than the last. He had spent years scavenging, learning to navigate the wreckage of Earth's collapse. But this was beyond anything he'd ever expected to encounter. The next morning, Aaron decided to confront Lyra, but not with accusations or fear. He needed answers, but he needed them carefully, without pushing her too hard. There was a delicate balance now, one that he wasn't sure how to approach. Lyra was still sitting in the corner, eyes fixed on an ancient star chart she'd somehow reconstructed from scraps, tracing its surface with her fingers as if she understood its secrets. She hadn't spoken much since the night of her revelation, and Aaron could tell something was brewing in her mind, something deeper than the knowledge she had already displayed. Lyra, Aaron began, taking the slow step toward her. I found something last night. Something about you. About your past. He watched her closely, trying to gauge her reaction. She didn't flinch, didn't look startled. Instead, she slowly turned her violet eyes toward him, a look of resigned understanding in them. I know, she said softly. Aaron's breath caught in his throat. You know. Lyra nodded, her fingers still resting gently on the map. I remember more now. It's like pieces of a puzzle are falling into place. She stood up, walking toward the corner of the shack where an old dormant terminal sat. Aaron had never seen it powered on before, but now, as Lyra approached, it flickered to life on its own. The ancient machine hummed softly, the screen lighting up with a strange series of symbols Aaron didn't recognize. What is this? Aaron asked, his voice barely above a whisper. This is part of me, she replied, the weight of her words sinking in. I was created for something much larger than what I've known. This is where it begins. Aaron stood back, watching as Lyra's hands moved with fluid precision over the terminal's interface, as if she had used it 1,000 times before. The screen flashed, and suddenly, encrypted files began to appear, more fragments of data, more references to the Sovereign Protocol. Lyra's expression remained calm, even detached, but there was a flicker of something else, something like fear, beneath her composed demeanor. She turned to Aaron. I was hidden for a reason. Not just because of Earth's fall, but because there were those who didn't want me to wake up. They didn't want anyone to know who I really am. Aaron was silent for a long moment, processing her words. What are you saying? Who are you? Lyra's gaze hardened, her eyes glowing faintly as she continued. I am the heir to a legacy that no one remembers. The people who created me, they were far beyond Earth's understanding. And I was meant to lead them. The power in her voice was undeniable, but Aaron could sense the burden behind it. She wasn't just learning about herself. She was rediscovering a truth that had been hidden from her for far too long. Her identity, her purpose, was far greater than the small existence they had carved out in the wreckage of Earth. You were meant to lead humanity, Aaron asked, struggling to comprehend. Lyra nodded. Humanity and something else. The legacy of Earth's greatest minds, those who bridged the gap between our species and others. I was hidden because I could change everything. But I was also left vulnerable, lost among the wreckage. Her voice faltered for the briefest of moments. And now, I can feel them coming. Whoever was watching before, they'll find us soon. Aaron's heart raced. His mind raced. There was so much he still didn't understand. But one thing was clear. The girl he had found was not just an orphan, not just a survivor. She was part of something monumental, something that could reshape humanity's place in the universe. And now, it was all starting to unravel. The days that followed felt charged with a quiet urgency. Lyra's revelations weighed heavily on Aaron's mind, but he found himself drawn to her more than ever. She wasn't just a girl from the scrapyard anymore. She was something else. Someone from a past intertwined with forgotten legacies, perhaps even with the fate of the human race itself. But what did it all mean? And why was she hidden in the first place? Lyra grew more withdrawn, as though the flood of memories was becoming too much for her to bear. She often stared off into the distance, her violet eyes distant and unfocused, as though she could see things Aaron couldn't. Despite her quiet demeanor, there was a palpable tension in the air, a sense that something was approaching, something she wasn't telling him. Lyra, Aaron asked one morning, trying to bridge the growing gap between them. You said you felt them coming. Who are they? Lyra's gaze flickered toward him, her expression unreadable. The ones who created me, she said softly. The ones who left me here. And the ones who want to make sure I never wake up. I don't know who they are, but I can feel them watching. They're out there. Aaron felt a chill creep down his spine. He had no idea what Lyra meant, but he trusted her. Something about the way she spoke, the certainty in her voice, made him believe that whatever was coming wasn't just a distant fear. It was something real, something they couldn't ignore. That night, as they sat in silence by the fire, a low hum filled the air. It wasn't the usual sound of the wind or the creaking of the wreckage around them. This was different, almost mechanical. Aaron glanced over at Lyra, who was standing, her posture rigid, her eyes scanning the horizon. They're here, she whispered. Before Aaron could ask what she meant, the sound grew louder, closer. His heart raced as he tried to make sense of it. But then the first shadow appeared in the distance, cutting through the haze, a sleek, silent silhouette against the dimming sky. Stay close, Lyra murmured, her voice low and steady. She took Aaron's hand, guiding him toward the interior of the shack. Whatever happens, don't trust them. They're not here to help. The hum intensified, and now Aaron could see it clearly. An enormous craft descending slowly from the sky, its surface gleaming with a dark, almost liquid sheen. It wasn't human, that much was obvious. Its design was far beyond anything Earth's technology could have conceived, a fusion of organic curves and metallic sharpness. The ship landed silently on the outskirts of the scrapyard, its massive size dwarfing everything around it. As it settled into place, the air seemed to grow still, heavy with an unnatural calm. Aaron's pulse quickened, and his hand instinctively tightened around Lyra's. "What is that?" he whispered. "That," Lyra said, her voice steady but tinged with something darker, "is the last piece of my past. And they've come for me." A series of hatchways opened on the ship's side, but no one emerged. It was as if the ship was waiting for something, waiting for her. Lyra looked at Aaron, her expression resolute. "They've known where I was all along, and now that they've found me, nothing will stop them from taking me back." Aaron didn't fully understand, but one thing was certain. Whatever was about to happen, they weren't prepared. He felt an overwhelming urge to protect her, to shield her from whatever was coming. But Lyra had already started moving toward the ship, her steps measured and deliberate. "Lyra, no," Aaron called out, but she didn't stop. Her face was calm, almost serene, as though she was ready for what was coming, something that Aaron still couldn't grasp. "This is my journey, Aaron," Lyra said quietly, without turning back. "And you'll have to trust me. I'm not the person you think I am, but I'm the only one who can end this." Before Aaron could speak, she disappeared into the shadows, moving toward the ship as if she was meant to be there. And as the dark vessel loomed, a cold realization hit Aaron. This wasn't just a moment of choice. It was the beginning of something far larger than either of them could have imagined. Aaron stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing, unable to move as he watched Lyra walk toward the ship. The hum of the vessel's engines reverberated through the ground beneath him, a deep, otherworldly sound that seemed to echo through his very bones. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to grab Lyra and pull her back, but a quiet voice, almost like Lyra's own, urged him to stay still. He wasn't sure why, but he trusted it. He trusted her. As Lyra neared the ship, its surface shimmered, and the dark hatchways slowly opened wider. No figures emerged from within, no sign of life other than the steady hum of the ship itself. It was an eerie silence, a stark contrast to the chaos building inside Aaron's chest. He wanted answers, but he had no idea how to even begin asking. "Lyra," he shouted, finally finding his voice, but his words were lost in the wind, swallowed by the vast emptiness between them. She didn't turn, didn't even flinch. She just walked forward with the same calm, deliberate steps, as though this was all inevitable. He had to go after her. Before he could make up his mind, something strange happened. The air around the ship shifted, as though the very atmosphere bent to its will. A shimmering force field flickered into existence, encircling the craft like an invisible wall. Aaron's heart pounded in his chest. There was no way in, at least not without something far beyond the tools he had on hand. But then he saw it. A faint light appeared above the ship, a small, glowing dot that quickly expanded into a holographic projection. The image was of a face, a being, humanoid but not human. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, with markings that glowed faintly, matching the same violet hue of Lyra's eyes. Its expression was calm, impassive, and yet there was an unmistakable recognition in its gaze as it focused on her. "You are the one," the being's voice echoed in Aaron's mind, a deep resonance that seemed to reverberate through his skull. "The Sovereign has returned." Lyra's footsteps faltered for just a moment as the voice washed over her, but then she resumed her steady pace toward the ship. Aaron could barely comprehend what he had just heard. The Sovereign. Was she? Was Lyra the one they were waiting for? The realization hit him hard. The girl he had saved from the scrapyard wasn't just a survivor. She was central to something much larger, something ancient and far beyond Earth's understanding. The being's gaze shifted to Aaron, its violet eyes narrowing. "You are not of our kind, but you are bound to her. You will be allowed to witness the awakening. But know this, once the Sovereign steps aboard, the fate of all will be sealed." Aaron's stomach twisted into knots. He felt like he was standing at the edge of a precipice, about to be thrust into a future he couldn't control, couldn't even begin to understand. But one thing was certain. This wasn't just Lyra's story anymore. It was theirs. It was humanity's. Lyra. He called out again, his voice desperate, but she didn't look back. She stepped into the light of the ship's entrance, the violet glow enveloping her like a second skin. The ship's door slid shut behind her with an almost imperceptible hum, and the vessel began to ascend, slowly at first, then faster, as though it was simply shedding the shackles of Earth's gravity. Lyra had gone, and with her, so had the answers. Aaron stood there, heart heavy with uncertainty, unable to tear his eyes away from the place where she had disappeared. His thoughts churned, racing to make sense of it all. But deep down, he knew one thing for sure. The world was changing. And Lyra, no, the Sovereign, was at the center of it. The question was, what would it mean for him, and for Earth, when she returned? The days after Lyra's departure felt like an eternity. Aaron had watched as the ship disappeared into the sky, its form dissolving into the clouds, leaving behind only the faintest traces of its passing. The world had seemed to shift in those moments. Once again, he was left to grapple with a reality that was far beyond anything he could have ever imagined. The silence that followed was deafening. The scrapyard, once a place of makeshift shelter and quiet survival, now felt like a forgotten outpost on the edge of an ancient world. Aaron spent the next few days wandering aimlessly, trying to make sense of it all. He combed through old tech, desperate for something to occupy his mind, but the question gnawed at him constantly. What had Lyra become? He tried to focus on the small things, working on repairs, organizing supplies. But the truth loomed over him, impossible to ignore. The girl he had rescued was gone, and with her, any semblance of the normal life he had once known. The Sovereign had returned to claim her place, but what did that mean for Earth? For humanity? For him? One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the barren land, a faint hum broke the stillness. Aaron's heart skipped a beat as he turned toward the sound, instinctively pulling himself back into the shadows. This time, the ship did not emerge from the sky. It appeared. In an instant, the sleek, dark vessel materialized, as though bending space itself. The air vibrated with a strange energy, and the ground beneath Aaron's feet seemed to tremble. The ship landed softly, almost soundlessly, just outside the scrapyard. For a moment, everything stood still. The ship's surface shimmered, its violet glow casting an ethereal light over the desolate landscape. And then the door opened. Lyra stepped out, not as the quiet, uncertain girl Aaron had rescued from the scrap heap, but as someone entirely different. She was taller, her posture regal, and her eyes, the violet depths that had once seemed so mysterious, now gleamed with an unmistakable power. Her presence was commanding, as if the very air around her had bent to her will. Aaron felt the weight of her gaze even from a distance. It was as though she could see through him, past the facade he had built, straight into his very soul. He wanted to speak, to call her name, but the words wouldn't come. He wasn't sure what to say, or if there was anything left to say. Lyra's voice broke the silence, low and steady. "Aaron," she said, her tone carrying an authority he couldn't ignore. "You've been waiting, and now the time has come for you to understand." She didn't wait for him to respond. She walked toward him, each step measured, confident. As she neared, Aaron could feel the weight of her presence like a storm on the horizon. He wasn't sure if it was fear or awe that churned in his chest, but he couldn't look away. "I've been reborn," Lyra continued, her voice calm yet filled with a power he couldn't comprehend. "The Sovereign Protocol has been awakened. The world as you know it will change. But you—" She paused, her gaze softening slightly, though the power within her remained. "You will stand beside me, Aaron. You will help lead." Aaron felt his world tilt on its axis. Lead? How could he, just a scavenger from the wreckage of the old world, have any part in whatever destiny Lyra now carried? The words seemed too vast, too unimaginable. But as Lyra looked at him, her eyes no longer filled with confusion, but with a purpose so ancient and so deep that it transcended time. Aaron realized something. He had never been simply a bystander in her story. He had been a part of it all along. And now, the path forward was clear, but it would not be easy. The world had shifted. Aaron could feel it in the air, in the very ground beneath his feet. It wasn't just Lyra who had changed. Everything around them seemed to pulse with a new energy, an ancient force that had been dormant, waiting for the right moment. That moment had come, and now, with the Sovereign at the center of it all, the world was on the brink of a new beginning, or a new end. Lyra stood before him, her eyes still glowing with that strange, violet power, but there was something else there now, a deep sadness, an understanding of the weight she carried. She wasn't just a leader now. She was the key to something that had been buried beneath the ruins of Earth for centuries. The question was no longer whether she could change the world. It was whether humanity was ready for that change. Aaron felt a lump rise in his throat. He had followed Lyra because she had needed him, but now, as he looked at her, he realized it wasn't just about saving her anymore. It was about saving everything. Everything. "Where do we go from here?" Aaron asked, his voice steady, though his heart was pounding in his chest. He had seen what she had become, but he still didn't fully understand what it all meant. He wanted to help her, but he didn't know what his role in this new world would be. Lyra met his gaze with a somber expression. "We go forward," she said quietly. "The time for waiting is over. The world is on the cusp of a great transformation, and humanity must choose its path. But it is not just humanity that will make this choice. There are others who will either stand with us or try to tear us down." Aaron nodded, his mind racing. There were forces in the universe far greater than anything Earth had ever encountered, and Lyra was caught in the center of it all. The Sovereign was not just a title. It was a responsibility, a legacy that had been passed down through time, one that she was now awakening to. He knew it was too late to turn back. The world had already begun its shift, and there was no way to stop it now. Suddenly, a sharp hum cut through the stillness, followed by the distant sound of ships approaching. Not one ship, but several. Lyra's face grew even more serious, her gaze scanning the horizon as she prepared herself for what was to come. "They're here," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "The others, the ones who will decide whether we rise or fall." Aaron's heart skipped a beat. "Who are they?" "The ones who were supposed to guide us," Lyra replied, her voice tinged with bitterness. "But they abandoned us. Now they've come to see whether we're worthy of the legacy they left behind, whether humanity is worthy of the future they dreamed of." The ships grew larger as they descended from the sky, their forms unmistakably advanced, far beyond anything Earth had ever known. But this time, Lyra did not hesitate. She stepped forward, her hand outstretched, her voice unwavering. "We will not bow," she declared. "We will rise, or we will fall. But we will decide our fate." The ships landed softly around them, and figures emerged, figures unlike any Aaron had ever seen. Tall, almost ethereal beings with eyes like deep space and skin that seemed to shimmer with energy. They were the creators, the ancient ones who had left Lyra behind. But now, as they stood before her, their expressions were unreadable. Silent, Aaron stood beside her, knowing that this moment would define everything. The fate of humanity was no longer in the hands of those who had come before. It was in the hands of Lyra. And whatever path she chose, he would walk beside her. The world was on the edge of something new, something unknown. And together, they would decide what came next. The age of the Sovereign had arrived, and the dawn of humanity's future was about to begin.